Homosexuality also was to be encouraged. People will be given permission to be homosexuals. That's the way it was stated. They won't have to hide it. And elderly people will be encouraged to continue to have active sex lives into their very old ages as long as they can. Everyone will be given permission to have sex, to enjoy however they want. Anything goes. This is the way it was put. And I remember thinking how arrogant for this individual or whoever he represents to feel that they can give or withhold permission for people to do things. But that was the terminology that was used. In this regard, clothing was mentioned. Clothing styles would be made more stimulating and provocative. Recall back in 1969 was the time of the miniskirt, when those miniskirts were very, very high and very revealing. He said it's not just the amount of skin that is exposed that makes clothing sexually seductive, but other more subtle things are often more suggestive. Things like movement and the cut of clothing and the kind of fabric, the positioning of accessories on the clothing. If a woman has an attractive body, why should she not show it, was one of the statements. There was not detail on what was meant by provocative clothing, but since that time, if you watch the changes in clothing styles, blue jeans are cut in a way that they're much more tight-fitting through the crotch. They form wrinkles. Wrinkles essentially are arrows, lines which direct one's vision to certain anatomic areas. And this was around the time of the burn your bra activity. He indicated that a lot of women should not go without a bra. They need a bra to be attractive. So instead of banning bras and burning them, bras would come back, but they would be thinner and softer, allowing more natural movement. It was not specifically stated, but certainly a very thin bra is much more revealing of the nipple and what else is underneath than the heavier bras that were in style up to that time. Technology. Earlier he said sex and reproduction would be separated. You would have sex without reproduction, and then technology was reproduction without sex. This would be done in the laboratory. Indicated already much research was underway about making babies in the laboratory. There was some elaboration on that, but I don't remember the details, how much of that technology has come to my attention since that time. I don't remember in a way that I can distinguish what was said from what I subsequently have just learned as general medical information. Families would be limited in size. We already alluded to not being allowed more than 2 children. Divorce would be made easier and more prevalent. Most people who marry will marry more than once. More people will not marry. Unmarried people would stay in hotels and even live together. That would be very common. Nobody would even ask questions about it. It would be widely accepted as no different from married people being together. More women will work outside the home. More men will be transferred to other cities in their jobs. More men would travel into work. Therefore, it would be harder for families to stay together. This would tend to make the married relationship less stable, and therefore tend to make people less willing to have babies. And the extended family would be smaller and more remote. Travel would be easier, less expensive for a while, so that people who did have to travel would feel that they could get back to their families, not that they were abruptly being made remote from their families. But one of the net effects of easier divorce laws, combined with the promotion of travel and transferring families from one city to another, was to create instability in the families. If both husband and wife are working and one partner gets transferred, the other one may not be easily transferred. So one either gives up his or her job and stays behind while the other leaves, or else gives up the job and risks not finding employment in the new location. Rather diabolical approach to this whole thing. Euthanasia. Everybody has a right to live only so long. The old are no longer useful. They become a burden. You should be ready to accept death. Most people are. An arbitrary age limit could be established. After all, you have a right to only so many steak dinners, so many orgasms, and so many good pleasures in life. And after you've had enough of them, and you're no longer productive in working and contributing, then you should be ready to step aside for the next generation. Some things that would help people realize that they had lived long enough. He mentioned several of these. I don't remember them all. Here are a few. The use of very pale printing ink on forms that people necessary to fill out, so that older people wouldn't be able to read the pale ink as easily and would need to go to younger people for help. Automobile traffic patterns. There would be more high-speed traffic lanes, traffic patterns that older people with their slower reflexes would have trouble dealing with, and thus tend to lose some of their independence. Big item which was elaborated at some length was the cost of medical care would be made burdensomely high. Medical care would be connected very closely with one's work, but also would be made very, very high in cost, so that it would simply be unavailable to people beyond a certain time. And unless they had a remarkably rich supporting family, they would just have to do without care. And the idea was that if everybody sees enough what a burden it is on the young to try to maintain the old people, then the young would become agreeable to helping mom and dad along the way, provided that this was done humanely and with dignity. And then the example was there could be like a nice farewell party, a real celebration. Mom and dad had done a good job. And then after the party's over, take the demise pill. The next topic is medicine. There would be profound changes in the practice of medicine. Overall, medicine would be much more tightly controlled. The observation was made, Congress is not going to go along with national health insurance that in 1969 he said is now abundantly evident, but it's not necessary. We have other ways to control health care. These will come about more gradually, but all health care delivery would come under tight control. Medical care would be closely connected to work. If you don't work or can't work, you won't have access to medical care. The days of hospitals giving away free care would gradually wind down until that was virtually non-existent. Costs would be forced up so that people won't be able to afford to go without insurance. People pay. You pay for it, you're entitled to it. It was only subsequently that I began to realize the extent to which you would not be paying for it. Your medical care would be paid for by others, and therefore you would gratefully accept on bended knee what was offered to you as a privilege. Your role being responsible for your own care would be diminished. As an aside here, this is not something that was developed at that time. I didn't understand at the time, but as an aside, the way this works, everybody's made dependent on insurance. And if you don't have insurance and you pay directly, the cost of your care is enormous. The insurance company, however, paying for your care does not pay that same amount. If you are charged, say, $600 for the use of an operating room, the insurance company does not pay $600 on your part. They pay $300 or $400. And that differential in billing has the desired effect. It enables the insurance company to pay for that which you could never pay for. They get a discount that's unavailable to you. When you see your bill, you're grateful that the insurance company can do that, and in this way you are dependent and virtually required to have insurance. The whole billing is fraudulent. Anyhow, continuing on now, access to hospitals would be tightly controlled. Identification will be needed to get into the building. Security in and around hospitals would be established and gradually increased so that nobody without identification could get in or move around inside the building. Theft of hospital equipment, things like typewriters and microscopes and so forth, would be allowed, and exaggerated, reports of it would be exaggerated, so that this would be the excuse needed to establish the need for strict security until people got used to it. And anybody moving about in a hospital would be required to wear an identification badge with a photograph and telling why he was there, employee or lab technician or visitor or whatever. And this is to be brought in gradually, getting everybody used to the idea of identifying themselves until it was just accepted. This need for ID to move about would start in small ways, hospitals, some businesses, but gradually expand to include everybody in all places. It was observed that hospitals can be used to confine people for the treatment of criminals. This did not mean necessarily medical treatment. At that time, I did not know the word psycho prison, as in the Soviet Union, but without trying to recall all the details, basically it was describing the use of hospitals both for treating the sick and for confinement of criminals for reasons other than the medical well-being of the criminal. Definition of criminal was not given. The image of the doctor would change. No longer would he be seen as an individual professional in service to individual patients, but the doctor would be gradually recognized as a highly skilled technician, and his job would change. The job is to include things like executions by lethal injection. The image of the doctor as being a powerful, independent person would have to be changed. And he went on to say, doctors make entirely too much money. They should advertise like any other product. Lawyers would be advertising too. Keep in mind, this was an audience of doctors being addressed by a doctor, and it was interesting that he would make some rather insulting statements to his audience without fear of antagonizing us. The solo practitioner would become a thing of the past. A few diehards might try to hold out, but most doctors would be employed by an institution of one kind or another. Group practice would be encouraged, corporations would be encouraged, and then once the corporate image of medical care, as this gradually became more and more acceptable, doctors would more and more become employees rather than independent contractors. And along with that, of course, unstated but necessary, is the employee serves his employer, not his patient. So that's, and we've already seen quite a lot of that in the last 20 years, and apparently more on the horizon. The term HMO was not used at that time, but as you look at HMOs, you see this is the way that medical care is being taken over since the national health insurance approach did not get through the Congress. A few diehard doctors may try to make a go of it, remaining in solo practice, remaining independent, which parenthetically is me. But they would suffer great loss of income. They'd be able to scrape by maybe, but never really live comfortably as those who were willing to become employees of the system. Ultimately, there would be no room at all for the solo practitioner after the system is entrenched. Next heading to talk about is health and disease. He said there would be new diseases to appear, which had not ever been seen before, would be very difficult to diagnose and be untreatable, at least for a long time. No elaboration was made on this, but I remember not long after hearing this presentation, when I had a puzzling diagnosis to make, I would be wondering, is this what he was talking about? Is this a case of what he was talking about? Some years later, as AIDS ultimately developed, I think AIDS was at least one example of what he was talking about. I now think that AIDS probably is a manufactured disease. Cancer. He said we can cure almost every cancer right now. Information is on file in the Rockefeller Institute if it's ever decided that it should be released. But consider, if people stop dying of cancer, how rapidly we would become overpopulated. You may as well die of cancer as something else. Efforts at cancer treatment would be geared more toward comfort than toward cure. There was some statement that ultimately the cancer cures which were being hidden in the Rockefeller Institute would come to light because independent researchers might bring them out despite these efforts to suppress them. But at least for the time being, letting people die of cancer was a good thing to do because it would slow down the problem of overpopulation. Another very interesting thing was heart attacks. He said, there is now a way to simulate a real heart attack. It can be used as a means of assassination. Only a very skilled pathologist who knew exactly what to look for at an autopsy could distinguish this from the real thing. I thought that was a very surprising and shocking thing to hear from this particular man at that particular time. This and the business of the cancer cure really still stand out sharply in my memory because they were so shocking and at that time seemed to me out of character. He then went on to talk about nutrition and exercise, sort of in the same framework. People would have to eat right and exercise right to live as long as before. Most won't. This in the connection of nutrition, there was no specific statement that I can recall as to particular nutrients that would be either inadequate or in excess. In retrospect, I tend to think he meant high salt diets and high fat diets would predispose toward high blood pressure and premature arteriosclerotic heart disease, and that if people were too dumb or too lazy to exercise as they should, then their circulating fats would go up and predispose to disease. And he said something about diet information, about proper diet would be widely available, but most people, particularly stupid people who had no right to continue living anyway, they would ignore the advice and just go on and eat what was convenient and tasted good. There were some other unpleasant things said about food. I just can't recall what they were, but I do remember of having reflections about wanting to plant a garden in the backyard to get around whatever these contaminated foods would be. I regret I don't remember the details, the rest of this about nutrition and hazardous nutrition. With regard to exercise, he went on to say that more people would be exercising more, especially running, because everybody can run. You don't need any special equipment or place. You can run wherever you are. As he put it, people will be running all over the place. And in this vein, he pointed out how supply produces demand, and this was in reference to athletic clothing and equipment, as this would be made more widely available and glamorized, particularly as regards running shoes. This would stimulate people to develop an interest in running, and as part of a whole sort of public propaganda campaign, people would be encouraged then to buy the attractive sports equipment and to get into exercise. Again, Well, in connection with nutrition, he also mentioned that public eating places would rapidly increase, that this had a connection with the family, too. As more and more people ate out, eating at home would become less important. People would be less dependent on their kitchens at home. And then this also connected to convenience foods being made widely available. Things like you could pop into the microwave. Whole meals would be available prefixed. And of course we've now seen this in some pretty good ones. But this whole different approach to eating out and to previously prepared meals being eaten in the home was predicted at the time to be brought about convenience foods. And the convenience foods, though, would be part of the hazard. Anybody who was lazy enough to want the convenience foods rather than fixing his own also better be energetic enough to exercise, because if he was too lazy to exercise and too lazy to fix his own food, then he didn't deserve to live very long. This was all presented as sort of a moral judgment about people and what they should do with their energies. People who are smart, who would learn about nutrition, and who are disciplined enough to eat right and exercise right are better people and are the kind you want to live longer. Somewhere along in here there was also something about accelerating